All right. Well, I know we have more folks still joining, which is fabulous. But I also know that everyone, it's a busy time of year and we're so grateful to have you all join. So we will get started. What I'm going to do kind of today is just walk us through some of the trends that we're seeing, some data and metrics from this past year. Then we'll talk a little bit about kind of the federal landscape, some of the things that are coming up, and we'll definitely leave some time for questions as well. So that's what we're going to do together this morning. So many of you are familiar with the food group, which is what brings you here this morning. For anybody who's a little bit newer to our work, next year we will be celebrating 50 years and really kind of trying to work across the food system in a holistic approach. So we've got our anti-hunger work where we partner with food shelves, some of whom are on this call today. We have our affordable grocery work, making sure that every neighborhood has access to high quality, healthy groceries. We've got our sustainable farming work, understanding that a good, strong local farm economy is critical for a good food system. And then our advocacy work, really thinking about how we get the food system, the future food system that we all want to see. So, to start us out, I wanted to share a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of food shelf visits statewide. And for those of you who joined our past virtual update, you kind of saw a preview to these numbers, but here they are, kind of all final and solid. You can see that we had almost 9 million visits to food shelves in the state of Minnesota in 2024. So it is about 1.5 million visits more than 2023. And you can just see the steady increase that we've been seeing in visits kind of post 2019. So when we look back to pre-pandemic, food shelves are at 2.5 times the capacity that they were at that time frame. So, really interesting to kind of see the trends and just see how many people are relying on the fabulous, fantastic food shelves that we have here in Minnesota to make ends meet. And wanted to just kind of share a little bit more about that data and those increases that we really are seeing pretty steady increases statewide. So, it fits this narrative that it is not a rural issue or an urban issue. We're seeing in all communities, suburban, exurban, that there is this kind of, steady increase in food shelf usage. Now, you can see a couple counties here are showing up as much more dramatic increases. That's often because either a program expanded services or a new food shelf started. So, for example, in Nobles County, we had a new partner come on, really, again, to just try to meet the need that was there in the community. So that's kind of a geographic snapshot of what the need looks like. And then a little bit more about who is using food shelves. So this pie chart has been pretty consistent. You can see about half of total food shelf visits
Yeah,
are from
7,
children and
11%.
seniors. So that is kind of who's visiting food shelves. And then, while data is really helpful and instructive and certainly something that we look at and pay a lot of attention to, I think it's always worth remembering, right, that each food shelf visit is a participant and someone who's really doing everything they can to make ends meet, get the food they need. So you can see here is a quote from Teresa, a participant at a food shelf, and just this amazing way that our food shelf partners make people feel so welcome and cared for. So, she says when I got there, they told me, "Come on in, we'll load you up." I couldn't believe it. When I got home, I cried. I live on a fixed income. I told my husband, "Look at all the food we have now." So we certainly are seeing many folks on fixed incomes, many folks working multiple jobs, but really still needing to rely on food shelves again to get through the month. So it's always worth asking, right? What is driving that? We certainly engage with a lot of our food shelf partners to kind of understand. We engage with food shelf participants, but really the overarching thing that everyone who goes to the grocery store knows is that grocery prices have certainly outpaced wage increases. So you can see here, if we compare the same bag of groceries from 2019 to the end of 2024, it's about a 28% increase in grocery prices. So for someone like Teresa, who's on a fixed income, it means that you're getting at least 28% less food than you were before. And that's where our amazing network of food shelves really comes in to help folks meet the need. In addition to grocery prices, clearly we have increased in costs around utilities, rent. I just got muted, but I unmuted myself, so hopefully we're good. Can everyone hear still?
Mhm.
All right. Yeah, so a lot of increased prices that are just, again, putting pressure on low-income households in Minnesota. Um, So that kind of sets a little bit of a data picture for what 2024 looked like statewide, and wanted to just kind of share a little bit more with you about in 2024 what you all helped the food group accomplish. So again, we can't do anything that we do without so many of you on this call, whether you're volunteers, donors, partners, or other community collaborators. So together, we distributed almost 25% more culturally connected foods and over 25% more local foods. So again, really making sure that the foods that we are sourcing and distributing with our partners are kind of core to the values of the future food system that we want to see. We together hosted over 250 farmers at the Emerging Farmers Conference that came from 15 states and 41 counties. And I think we had 8 languages live translated at that conference. Together, we brought affordable groceries to over 43,000 folks and gathered 200 advocates at Hunger Day on the Hill. So these are just a snapshot of some of the amazing impacts that we were able to have with your support in light of the need and data that we see. So that's kind of where we've been, and I wanted to share a little bit more about what we are seeing next. So if you have coffee near you, you can make this a fun game, and every time I say the word uncertainty, you can take a drink and you'll be well caffeinated by the end. So in no way does the food group have a crystal ball. There's so much we don't know, but we wanted to share where we're at now and some of the things that we're at least really watching for here coming up in the future. And again, feel free to add questions to the chat. We'll have time to answer questions at the end. So I probably won't take them as we go, but you can pop them in the chat and we will have time at the end. So the first change that I wanted to share that has already happened. So again, we've got some federal changes that have happened already, and some that we are watching and tracking in the future. So we're going to start with where we are at now and some of the federal changes that are already having impact. So the main thing I wanted to share with everyone is that we are seeing a reduction in free food through the TFAP program. So for those of you who don't know TFAP, it stands for the Emergency Food Assistance Program. It is food that is provided at the federal level to go to food shelves in the state of Minnesota. So you can see on this map that there are 487 local organizations that receive TFAP food. The food group distributes TFAP in Hennepin County, right? But we have other regional food banks that distribute it to all of these locations. And so there is a portion of TFAP that is at the pleasure of the Secretary of the USDA. And so that portion of TFAP was suspended. So we are seeing an immediate 30 to 35% reduction in the free food that will be going out to food shelves. So obviously looking at the visit trends, knowing that our partners are right at 2.5 times the capacity they were 5 years ago, seeing a 35% reduction in that free food available from the federal government has been really, really challenging. The other thing that we're seeing is that some federal grants have either been suspended or terminated. So that has impacts at the food group. We are currently locked out of a federal grant that funds our Big River Farms work. So we are scenario planning and making a lot of adjustments to handle that unexpected. For us, it's about a $200,000 shortfall on a multi-year signed contract that we are just locked out of. We just cannot access the payment system. But sector-wide, there are some federal grant implications as well. So the main one I want to highlight here today is the Local Foods Purchasing Assistance Program, LFPA. I don't know if I said what that acronym really was, but it's LFPA. And basically, that was a federal grant that allowed individual food shelves to connect with local farmers. So it was a great way to really build those local connections. That was terminated by USDA. And so that's a double hit for our partners. We've got food shelves who had that in their food budget that it has been removed from. And for farmers, it's really difficult because it's a market disruption. So there are farmers who are buying seeds, planting, crop planning for that, and that market no longer exists. So all of that just adds up to more pressure, right? We look at a system that really is operating at capacity with added pressure from the existing cuts that have already gone into effect. And there's things on the horizon that are also really, really concerning. And so the main thing that I want to talk about at the federal level that we are watching really closely are threats to SNAP. So for those of you who kind of are tracking more closely, there's a budget reconciliation process happening at the federal level, and there have been targets set of how much certain areas or certain programs, how much should be cut from them. The target that has been set for SNAP is $230 billion. So again, just to kind of set the stage, SNAP is a huge piece of the safety net of how people get food. So we've talked a lot about food shelves, the amazing role that they play as a local safety net, but for every one meal that's being distributed by a food shelf, SNAP is providing 9. So 230 billion is almost an impossible number to wrap my head around. But in partnership with other folks, we're trying to kind of understand it. And in partnership with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities in DC, they were helping us understand that it's about $200 million per year just in Minnesota if that cut were to take effect. We're also watching some other cuts that are being proposed at the federal level to things like Medicaid and affordable housing, right? There's always the potential of a recession, which could lead more people to needing services. So again, the reason that this all feels really important is that we need to be scenario planning for what is coming, and that all of these cuts are going to impact the same low-income folks who are needing food shelves already and will need them even more. So that's a little bit of setting the stage. Again, there's so much we don't know. But what I wanted to do in our last few minutes together here before questions is just kind of share what the food group's doing about this, and how we're approaching kind of next steps. So the main thing that we want to start off our response with is being grounded and rooted in our values. So this is not the time to shy away from hard conversations. It's not the time to kind of go underground with the values that we have held for years as an organization. So we are going to lean in to our values around community engagement, nutrition, local foods. We're also going to continue to lean into our values around racial equity. We know that the food system is not impacting everyone equally. And in fact, communities of color still have almost double the rates of food insecurity. And so we are going to continue to lean in to all of those values. And we're also going to work hard on connecting with a lot of partners and trying to scenario plan and prioritize how we do make the most impact in a pretty challenging environment that we've laid out. So part of that is a lot of listening, learning, and planning. So it's not necessarily the splashiest part of the work, but it's not often that you get such a long runway to know when a potential major change is coming. So for example, we've talked a lot as a team about COVID and all the rapid response planning that we did at the food group and with our partners during COVID. That was not a planned event. However, the discussions around SNAP cuts and other cuts to the social safety net, we do have a runway. Those will likely take effect if passed as proposed in the fall. And so how do we use this time to really listen, learn, connect with community? We're hosting regional convenings with some organizations on the call. We're hosting them with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families and FEN and the University of Minnesota Extension. We're going to all the corners of the state to connect with food shelves, understand what trends folks are seeing, and just kind of really build resilience in community with other folks and share wisdom of what we're going to do. We're thinking about how we can deploy volunteers differently. So we're going to set up a volunteer cohort who can also go out to food shelves. Clearly, if there's 487 of them in the state, we're not going to have our staff be able to go to all of them, but we have an amazing volunteer base and so do other food banks. And so how do we deploy volunteers to be a really helpful support? And we're continuing to invest in our lived experience leadership cohort, knowing that folks who have experienced hunger, who've been on SNAP, continue to be the experts on how we prepare for this new context and scenario. We're going to continue doing everything we can to provide great food to our food shelf partners, knowing that they are going to need that support more than ever. So we are working hard to source creatively, continue to offer really high quality foods that are most in demand from partners. You can see so far this fiscal year, we've already been able to distribute almost 4 million meals. And we're going to use our affordable grocery program strategically too to fill gaps. So looking at both Fair for All and Twin Cities Mobile Market, how do we think about them as potential levers to help with this strained capacity in the free food network? So looking at communities that don't have a grocery store. For instance, we just opened a Fair for All site in Rush City. You can see this shopper here kind of just sharing how, before Fair for All, it was either drive 20 miles or go to the dollar store. So using a Fair for All to look at kind of rural communities that don't have grocery access, and then looking at Twin Cities Mobile Market to think about urban communities that don't have grocery access. So some of you may have heard that the Lund's grocery store in downtown St. Paul closed. And that's a community that just doesn't have a grocery store. And so we've been in talks with the city of St. Paul, and we're set to have the Twin Cities Mobile Market open at a location nearby in May. And lastly, we're going to continue supporting our farmers, right? Understanding that to have a robust local food economy, it insulates us from all sorts of shifts and supply chain challenges. So you can see here that, Bao is just talking about the importance of fresh produce and having everyone have access to fresh produce and fresh produce that is culturally familiar to them continues to be critically important in our response. And I've talked a lot about cuts coming at the federal level. I'm talking about them because it would be silly not to scenario plan for what happens if they do come and how we build our muscles to adapt and be ready for what comes. And we continue to do everything that we can. And I know many of you on this call are continuing to use your voices as well to continue to advocate about the importance of these programs. So we were really excited to have over 200 folks join us at Hunger Day on the Hill. That's a picture of everybody on the steps of the Capitol. It was folks from food shelves, from healthcare organizations, dietitians, community members, board members, volunteers, just coming to talk about how important it is at the state level to support our food shelves. And we are hopeful that there may be some one-time funding that's put together for food shelves at the state legislature. And we're continuing to talk a lot with our congressional delegation as well. Um, and you can see here is a quote from Lisa, who's from our lived experience cohort, just sharing about kind of the empowering role that advocacy can play for folks, the leadership development piece. And we're excited because Lisa's going to be joining a couple of our staff on a trip to DC next month to just continue talking about the important role of safety net programs. So that's kind of an overview briefly of some of the ways that we're responding to what we see is coming. I did want to leave plenty of time for questions, just because I know there's a lot there. For some folks who are really into the details, happy also to talk offline about some of the specific programs or the specific grant areas or the specific kind of legal implications. But I wanted to keep it high level enough just so we could all kind of ground in what we're seeing. And again, it feels more important than ever. The food group often talks a lot about food for today, change for tomorrow. And that feels more instructive than ever of how we make sure that the food we are providing is a good quality, that we get as much to our partners as we can, and then we continue to work for change for tomorrow. And the other thing I'm thinking a lot about too is just in all the things that we can't control, which is a lot of them, right? Food still has this magic power to create community, and sharing food, moving boxes of food, rolling up our sleeves and really being together with our neighbors. I think it's really just more important than ever. So with that, I want to open it up to some questions. See a couple of questions in the chat. One question from Jessica Francis, who's doing amazing work at Open Cupboard, is around what's the kind of situation on potential funding for food shelves at the state level. It's hard to know. What's great is both the House and Senate have heard testimony from our team and from many partners around funding for food shelves. It's a tough budget situation at the state level this session, but it does look like there will be some probably one-time funding included. Both the House and the Senate have some set aside. It will now kind of just be to negotiate what the amount is and how it all shakes out. I think there will be some though. I see another question about what's a way that volunteers can support. One thing I really just share right now with volunteers is that a lot of the volunteer support is really needed at the local food shelf level. When you look at that graph of capacity, there are food shelves that, were designed to serve 30 families in a session and are serving 90. And so we have an amazing map on our website where it's called our Get Help map. You can find a local food shelf in your community. And I think there's always amazing ways to volunteer there too. We've got a question around Sophia. If we've had any communication from USDA. Nope, we have not. Can the slides be shared? Absolutely, they can. We have a recording of the whole presentation, which we'll share, but we absolutely can share the slides as well. If you're interested in getting slides emailed, maybe just, what should we do? Just pop your email, direct message your email to me, and I will copy and paste it, and we'll make sure the team sends them out. And that's another good question. Before we wrap things up, there's a question around, is there any particular foods that these TFAP cuts impact, like meats and dairy? So that is a really great question. And how TFAP works is you get kind of funding at the federal level, and then our fabulous partners at Department of Children, Youth, and Families at the state kind of help decide what foods to purchase. And one thing that's been really amazing is in the last several years, the food purchases have been informed by the food shelf participant survey that goes out annually. And so, yeah, the foods are amazing. It's produce and meat and dairy. So those are tough things to not have in the system as well. Um,
Sophia, I have a question.
yes.
I'm just wondering about how the food group is working with Hennepin County food security planning that's going on.
Yes. So we're definitely part of that group. I mean, I think that, what's really interesting about kind of how people are thinking about food security is that that's so many different levels. So you've got local municipalities doing planning, you have county level folks doing planning, you've got kind of more regional and statewide planning. So we're trying to be as engaged in those different levels as we can, but also knowing that partners who are doing work in those places, are obviously the greatest assets and advocates. Um, got some other folks with questions around like funding options. Yeah, we're always open to ideas. So absolutely, as we think about our organizational scenario planning, it's how we are as efficient as possible and how we find new funders to supplant and supplement some of the federal funding. So any ideas that folks have are are so welcome and appreciated. And again, we are happy to talk more. It does feel like there's so much going on right now that in some ways this kind of scratches the surface. I want to be mindful though of everyone's time and I want to pass it over to Emily so that she can kind of just share some last ways to get involved. But please don't hesitate to reach out if there's any other information that the food group can help provide on this too.
Thanks, Sophia. Hi, everyone. I am Emily Eddy White, Director of Advancement and Culture here at the Food Group. Thanks for taking time to be with us this morning. We really appreciate your support. We have all different types of partners and supporters on this morning, and we are powered through collaboration and partnership by volunteers and donors as well. So thank you. It truly makes a difference and means so much to us. So, as community need is high and the federal funding landscape is changing and impacting our work, there are ways to take action and get involved. We're getting lots of questions on like, what can we do? So there's lots of different ways to plug in. So volunteer opportunities, somebody asked about that. So we have year-round volunteer opportunities, packing and sorting food. We also encourage folks to connect with your local food shelf too. And then going into kind of spring, summer, we'll have seasonal opportunities too at our farm, at orchards, at other farms to glean, as well as farmers market. So we would love to plug you in. Also donate. You can make gifts online. You can connect with myself. We appreciate support so much. Advocate. I think we're going to drop the advocacy alert link in the chat. You can sign up and get action alerts about advocacy and different policies. It's also on our website. Hold a virtual food drive, buy from local farmers, support our events, follow us on social. For the most up-to-date kind of live communication, social, and sign up for our e-newsletter. Lots of great blog content. And then check out our website. But appreciate everyone so much. Thank you for your support and lifting up community. And thanks for tuning in this morning. We'll be following up with slides too. We can attach the slides and the recording to everyone that signed up. So yeah, thank you, everyone.